welcome to another deep dive.
Yeah.
This time we're taking a plunge into the INTD Essentials Diver Manual.
This one's a real gem, packed with insights that can help any diver, whether they're brand new to INTD or a seasoned pro.
Absolutely. It goes way beyond your basic open water stuff.
Yeah.
We're talking physiology, equipment, dive planning, even some really interesting perspectives on skills that you might think, oh, I've got that covered.
Yeah, I think what's really cool about this manual is it goes deeper than just the what. It really delves into the why behind the techniques and the gear.
Totally. It's like the difference between following a recipe and actually understanding the science of baking, you know?
Yeah.
So let's preheat our brains and start with diving physiology. I have to admit, when I first saw this section, I was like, oh no, this is going to be like, back to school. But it's actually super engaging. It starts with how our cells create energy.
Yeah.
And you won't believe this, but there are two ways that our bodies can create energy anaerobically.
Right. It's not just about running out of air like we usually think of it. There's another energy pathway that kicks in, especially when we push our bodies a little bit more. It's like we have a reserve tank, for those quick bursts of energy, just like when a sprinter takes off.
Oh.
That's called anaerobic lactic. But when that reserve tank runs dry, then our bodies switch to anaerobic lactic, and that's the one that produces lactic acid, which basically means muscle burn.
So that burning feeling, like when your legs are just screaming after a really tough fin, that's the lactic acid in action.
That's it.
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting, at least for me, free radicals. Apparently, those high oxygen levels we encounter when diving, they can actually increase the production of these, rogue molecules that can actually damage our cells.
It's a bit of a paradox, isn't it? We need oxygen to survive, obviously.
Right.
But even breathing pure oxygen, like we do in some diving situations, can create these molecules that are harmful to our cells.
Right.
What's even more interesting is that the manual connects this to specific diving risks, like decompression sickness and oxygen toxicity.
So wait a minute. Are you saying that what we eat can actually affect our risk of DCS?
Well, the manual talks about the role of antioxidants in a diver's diet. It suggests that what we eat can have an impact on our susceptibility to those conditions. But it also emphasizes that it's not as simple as just like popping a bunch of antioxidant pills before every dive. Too much can be just as bad as too little. It's all about finding that balance.
Okay, balance is key. But I guess I'm still wondering, why is this all so important? Why does it matter for us as divers?
Because diving physiology goes beyond just breathing and pressure. It's about understanding how our entire body functions and reacts to this really unique environment that we put ourselves in.
Okay.
The manual dives into all these different body systems: skeletal, muscular, nervous, circulatory, respiratory, you name it, highlighting how they're all interconnected.
Wow.
For instance, if you're stressed out, it can actually affect your muscles. And the way we breathe, it can affect blood flow. It's this fascinating web.
So it all ties into those specific diving physiology challenges, like CNS oxygen toxicity. I'll admit, that acronym, CONVENTED, really helped me remember the symptoms.
That's a good one.
Convulsion, visual issues, ears ringing, nausea, twitching, irritability, dizziness, and dyspnea.
Yeah, it can get pretty intense. That's why it's so important to really understand it.
Right.
And the manual does a good job of explaining what's actually happening at a cellular level, because when we have that deep understanding, it helps us make safer decisions when we're underwater.
Makes sense. Now, the manual also covers inert gas narcosis.
Ah, yes, the martini effect.
Right. That feeling of getting a little tipsy at depth.
Exactly.
But it's not just about nitrogen, is it?
No, I love the analogy they use in the manual. They compare different gases to cars, trucks, and bicycles.
Okay, I'm listening.
The bigger the vehicle, the harder it is to move through traffic, right? So larger gas molecules, they can slow down our nerve impulses. That's what leads to that narcosis effect.
And smaller, less soluble molecules like helium, they actually improve the flow. It's like they're zipping through traffic.
Exactly. That's why helium is often used in deeper diving mixes.
Okay, now on to something a little less fun. Decompression sickness. There was something in here that really surprised me. They highlighted the lymphatic system, explaining how bubbles can actually get trapped there and cause inflammation. I had no idea that swollen lymph nodes could be a sign of DCS.
It's not as well known, but it's definitely something to be aware of. And the manual does a good job of debunking some common diving myths, too. Like the one about not peeing while diving.
Oh, yeah. I've heard that one.
Turns out holding it in can actually be more dangerous because of something called immersion diuresis.
Wait, so are you saying we should pee in our wetsuits?
It's more about understanding how our bodies shift fluids underwater.
Right.
It's natural to need to pee more when we dive. If we try to hold it in, it disrupts that process and can actually lead to dehydration.
Okay.
And that, ironically, can increase your DCS risk.
Myth busted. Now, there's one condition in this section that I have to admit I need a bit more clarification on, and that's patent foramen oval, or PFO.
Imagine a small flap in the heart. It's supposed to close after birth, but in some people it doesn't fully close. And that creates what's called a PFO. For divers, this can be a concern because bubbles can potentially travel through this opening, and that can increase the risk of DCS.
So if you have a PFO, does that mean you can't dive?
Not necessarily. The manual really emphasizes the importance of talking to a doctor, specifically a cardiologist, if you suspect you might have a PFO.
Okay.
And even if you do have one, there are precautions you can take to minimize the risk, like avoiding strenuous activity after a dive, because that can increase pressure and force bubbles through that opening.
So knowledge is power when it comes to PFOs and diving.
Absolutely. It's all about understanding the risks and making informed decisions.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground on diving physiology. It's amazing how much is happening inside our bodies when we're underwater.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
But now it's time to gear up, literally. What does the IANTD Essentials Manual have to say about getting our equipment dialed in?
It all starts with some core configuration principles. First and foremost, clean and streamlined. No danglies.
Ah, so no more octopus hoses trailing behind you like seaweed. I've definitely seen that.
Exactly. And it's not just about looking good, although that's a bonus.
Right.
A clean config reduces drag, which improves your efficiency and safety underwater.
Okay, I can see how that would make a difference, especially when it comes to air consumption and, not getting snagged on things.
Exactly. And the manual even explains how a clean configuration can help minimize the risk of decompression illness.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that.
It all ties together. Now, the second principle is all about keeping it simple.
I was going to say, I bet it's about keeping things simple.
You got it. KISS, keep it simple, stupid. Overly complex gear, it's just more prone to malfunctions and confusion, especially in an emergency.
Makes sense. The last thing you want when something goes wrong underwater is to be fiddling with a bunch of gadgets you don't even really need.
Exactly. Simplicity is key.
Okay, so we've got clean and streamlined, we've got KISS. What about accessibility? I noticed the manual mentions that too.
Yes. This one's all about being able to reach all your valves, even on those back-mounted tanks.
Okay.
And this is where something called the roll-off phenomenon comes in.
Roll off.
Imagine you're diving in an overhead environment like a cave or a wreck, and your tank valve keeps bumping against the ceiling.
Uh-huh.
Well, it can actually get knocked into the off position.
No way.
Yeah. It's like someone's secretly turning off your air supply.
That's terrifying.
It's a silent danger.
Mm.
And the manual really stresses how important it is to be able to reach those valves quickly so you can turn them back on if that happens.
So accessibility is crucial, especially in those overhead environments. What about redundancy? I know the manual mentions that as well.
Redundancy is all about backups,
Right.
having backups for critical equipment.
Makes sense.
But the manual does caution against going overboard.
Okay.
It's about finding the right balance between having a backup plan and not overcomplicating things. Like having 2 regulators on your primary air supply. That's smart, but 4 might be a bit much,
It's like that saying 2 is 1 and 1 is none.
Exactly.
But, okay, let's get down to the specifics of the gear itself. The manual goes into quite a bit of detail about each piece of equipment, highlighting the features that are really essential for safe and efficient diving. What are some of the key takeaways there?
Regulators are obviously crucial.
Right.
The manual explains the differences between balanced and unbalanced regulators, why hose routing matters, and why it's so important to invest in high-quality regulators.
I can see why. Your regulator is literally your lifeline down there.
It is, and then there's backplates and harnesses.
Hmm.
Okay. The manual gets into the nitty-gritty of D-ring placement, why you need a crotch strap, and why stainless steel buckles are preferred. It's all about creating a secure and comfortable system that you can really rely on.
And what about buoyancy control devices? They get a lot of attention in the manual too.
Yeah, BCDs are super important, especially for technical diving. The manual talks about those 3 critical buoyancy tests. Those are the ones that help determine whether you need a backup wing or not.
So not everyone needs a backup wing.
Right.
Okay.
The manual walks you through those tests so you can make an informed decision based on your specific setup and diving style.
I like that empowering divers to make those choices based on their own needs rather than just blindly following rules.
It's all about finding what works best for you.
Now, what about side mount configuration? That seems to be gaining popularity, especially in technical diving.
It is.
Does the manual touch on that at all?
Yeah, it mentions side mount as a growing trend and highlights the differences in equipment setup compared to back mount. And of course, it covers rebreathers, which are a whole other world of technology and considerations.
Choosing a rebreather seems like a pretty big decision.
It is a big decision, and the manual emphasizes the importance of choosing a unit that's comfortable for you and well suited to your needs. It also stresses the importance of extensive training and practice to really master rebreather diving.
Makes sense. It's not something to just jump into lightly. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground on equipment, but before we actually get in the water, we need a plan. Let's talk about dive planning. What are some of the core principles that this manual highlights?
The manual really emphasizes that every single dive, no matter how simple or how complex, it has limits.
Limits.
Yeah, limits on depth, time, and gas. And it's really important to understand that those limits, they're not fixed, they can change.
Change. So you're saying there's no one-size-fits-all approach to dive planning?
Exactly. You need to consider all those factors when planning your dive. For instance, let's start with depth considerations.
Okay, so when we're thinking about depth, how deep we want to go, what are the key factors that we need to think about?
Well, the manual reminds us about oxygen exposure and the risks of CNS oxygen toxicity.
Right.
It even uses tools like the Dalton Diamond and NOAA exposure limits to help us stay within safe limits.
Okay.
And of course, we need to consider narcosis, which becomes more pronounced the deeper we go.
Yeah, that car, truck, and bicycle analogy, I think it really helps to understand how those different gases affect narcosis. So the deeper we go, the more we need to be mindful of that narcotic potential of the gas we're breathing.
Exactly. Now, let's move on to time considerations.
Time. I always thought it was mainly about depth and gas.
Time plays a crucial role, especially when it comes to decompression illness.
Yeah.
The manual emphasizes things like staying hydrated, maintaining a slow ascent rate, doing those safety stops.
Okay, those are the basics. But I guess I never really thought about how other factors could affect my decompression obligations too.
They can make a big difference, especially on those longer dives. For example, if you're cold and you're shivering, your body's working harder, right?
Right.
You're consuming more gas, and that can potentially increase your decompression time. And then there's the mental aspect. Being mentally prepared for a longer, more challenging dive that can make a huge difference in managing stress and preventing those little mistakes that can snowball into bigger problems.
It's all connected.
It is.
Now let's talk about gas planning. The manual gets pretty detailed here, explaining things like SCR and RMV rates and how to actually calculate them.
Yeah, it's all about making sure you have enough gas to breathe and enough gas for emergencies.
Right.
And I appreciate that the manual provides clear examples both in metric and imperial units, which is helpful for divers around the world.
Definitely. But what about this term rock bottom gas? That sounds a bit ominous.
Rock bottom gas is the absolute minimum amount of gas you need to reserve for a safe ascent while sharing air with your buddy.
This is like your emergency reserve. Once it's gone, you're in trouble.
Exactly. And the manual stresses that reaching your rock bottom gas means it's time to go up, no exceptions.
Got it. No arguing with rock bottom. So how do we figure out what that magic number is?
The manual explains the CAT formula, which is used to calculate rock bottom gas. Again, they provide clear examples so you can figure out exactly how much gas you need to reserve for a safe ascent.
So the CAT formula, that's our key to figuring out that emergency reserve. But how do we determine our total gas needs for the entire dive?
The manual goes through a complete example showing you how to calculate the total gas needed, combining your working gas, which is what you breathe during the dive, and your rock bottom gas. It's really helpful to see all the pieces of the puzzle come together.
It's like a master class in dive planning. We've covered a lot of ground today, from the inner workings of our bodies to the importance of choosing the right gear and meticulously planning our dives. But there's one more essential element that we need to explore diving skills.
This is where the rubber meets the road. It's all about developing those physical and mental skills that we need to be safe, efficient, and, have fun underwater.
I'm ready to dive into that.
Let's do it.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the INETD Essentials Diver Manual.
We're all geared up and ready to explore the world of diving skills.
Yeah, last time we really dug into the why behind diving physiology and equipment. Now it's time for the how. The physical skills that can really make us better divers.
It's like learning the moves that turn you from an amateur dancer into, a graceful underwater ballerina.
Okay, I like that. So first up, buoyancy control. This manual really stresses that it's not just about achieving neutral buoyancy.
Right.
It's about finding that sweet spot where you can effortlessly hover, like an astronaut in space.
It's about conserving energy, minimizing our impact on the environment, and moving with grace and precision. But I know getting to that point can sometimes feel like a constant battle with your BCD.
Oh, tell me about it. It's like, am I going up? Am I going down? What's happening here?
Mm-hmm.
But the manual actually acknowledges that.
Mm-hmm.
It breaks down all those factors
Yeah.
that can influence buoyancy.
Right, like the fit of your BCD, cylinder placement, your body position, even your breathing.
So it's not just about adding or dumping air. There's a real art to it.
Exactly. And the manual even points out common mistakes that a lot of divers make, like extending your arms or bending your knees, which can throw off your buoyancy.
Oh, yeah. It's like a checklist for fine-tuning your buoyancy. It helps you pinpoint those subtle adjustments that make all the difference.
Exactly. Now, speaking of subtle adjustments, let's talk about trim.
Okay, trim. I used to think it was just about looking cool underwater.
It's definitely a bonus to look cool underwater, right?
Right.
But proper trim has some real practical benefits. It helps reduce drag, conserves energy, and minimizes silt outs. It's all about streamlining your body to move efficiently through the water.
And I love how the manual brings back that balance beam analogy, explaining how to adjust your weight distribution and gear placement to find that sweet spot where you're perfectly balanced and streamlined.
It's about finding that zen-like equilibrium in the water. And once you nail it, you'll see the difference in your air consumption, your stability, and even your ability to, navigate those tight spaces without stirring up a silt storm.
Okay, so buoyancy and trim, that's about moving smoothly and efficiently through the water. But now let's talk about propulsion techniques.
Okay.
The manual describes 6 basic kicks, each with its own strengths and applications. It's like a whole dance repertoire for underwater movement.
It is. We've got the frog kick, the modified frog kick, the modified flutter kick, the shuffle kick, the reverse kick, and the helicopter turn. And what's really cool is that the manual doesn't just describe these kicks. It explains when to use each one, how to do it correctly, and even the common mistakes that people make. It's like having your own underwater coach right there with you.
All right, Coach, let's start with the frog kick. The manual calls it like the primary propulsion technique for most technical divers. What makes it so special?
The frog kick is powerful. It generates a lot of thrust, and it minimizes those silt outs. It's all about directing the wash of water behind you and to the sides, not down toward the bottom, which is really important.
So it's not just about kicking hard, it's about kicking smart.
Exactly. And the manual really emphasizes the importance of the glide phase, allowing that momentum from the kick to propel you forward before you initiate the next kick. It's about maximizing efficiency.
And there's even a modified frog kick, right? For like confined spaces or those silt-prone areas.
Right. The modified frog kick eliminates that scissor kick motion of the regular frog kick. So you're just using your feet and ankles for more precision and less disturbance.
I can see how that would be super helpful, like in a wreck or a delicate coral reef.
Yeah.
Or at the modified flutter kick. I feel like you use that one a lot.
The modified flutter kick is great. It's super versatile. It's basically a smaller, more controlled version of the traditional flutter kick. You keep those knees slightly bent, use your ankles to generate the power.
Right. It's almost like a mini flutter kick.
Exactly.
Now, what about the shuffle kick?
The shuffle kick.
When would I use that one?
The shuffle kick is perfect for those times when you need to move slowly and precisely along the bottom.
So if I'm looking for that tiny little nudibranch, shuffle kick is the way to go.
You got it. It's a gentle, almost scooting motion, perfect for delicate environments.
Okay, what about the reverse kick? I always struggle with that one. It feels so awkward.
Think of the reverse kick as your get-out-of-jail-free card.
Okay.
It lets you back out of tight spots or reverse direction without having to turn your whole body around.
So instead of doing that awkward maneuver with my whole body, I could just use a reverse kick. Brilliant. But how do I actually do it?
It's all about using the instep of your foot to push water forward, which propels you backward. It takes a bit of practice to get the hang of it, but once you do, it's a game changer.
I'm going to have to practice that one. And last but not least, we have the helicopter turn. I'm picturing myself spinning like a top.
That's the idea.
Okay.
The helicopter turn allows you to rotate 360 degrees while staying centered over a single point. It's a combination of frog kick with one leg and a reverse kick with the other.
Okay.
That creates that pivoting motion. The manual uses a great visualization. Imagine you're tossing a ball of water from the foot doing the frog kick and catching it with the foot doing the reverse kick.
Oh, that's a good one. I can picture that.
And it's incredibly useful in tight spaces, especially those silt-prone environments.
So we've got this whole toolkit of kicks now, each with its own purpose. It's like becoming a more versatile dancer, ready to adapt to any underwater rhythm.
That's a great way to put it.
But mastering the moves, that's just one part of the equation, right?
Right.
We also need to be mentally sharp.
Absolutely, and that's where those mental skills come in. The manual really emphasizes awareness. It breaks it down into 3 types: self-awareness, global awareness, and situational awareness.
Okay, let's break those down. Self-awareness seems pretty straightforward. It's about paying attention to ourselves.
It is. It's
It
about
is.
monitoring our air pressure, our depth, our time, our overall well-being. A diver with good self-awareness, they're like their own internal gauge, constantly checking in to make sure everything is functioning properly.
It's like having that little voice in your head. Hey, how's your air? Are you breathing okay? Are you getting cold?
Exactly. Now, global awareness, that's like having a wide-angle lens. You're
Yeah.
taking in your surroundings, noticing any potential hazards, any changes in the environment.
So that's about knowing where we are in relation to our exit point, keeping track of our buddy, paying attention to currents, visibility. It's like having that big picture awareness.
Exactly. A diver with good global awareness, they're constantly scanning the seam, anticipating those potential challenges.
And then we've got situational awareness, which I think is maybe the trickiest one to really master. It's about understanding cause and effect, right?
Exactly. It's about recognizing how our actions might impact the environment
Yeah.
or our own safety, and then making smart choices based on that. A diver with good situational awareness is thinking ahead, anticipating those consequences.
It's like playing that mental game of chess underwater.
Exactly. You're not just reacting to what's happening right now, you're thinking about what might happen next.
So all 3 types of awareness, being self-aware, globally aware, and situationally aware, that's crucial for safe and enjoyable diving. It's about being proactive, observant, and making those informed decisions based on a real understanding of ourselves, our surroundings, and what might happen next.
Absolutely. Now, the manual also talks about something called task loading.
Task loading.
It's basically recognizing that we only have so much mental bandwidth, you know? When we try to do too many things at once, our performance suffers.
It's like juggling. Too many balls in the air, and eventually you're going to drop one.
Exactly. And underwater, dropping the ball can have serious consequences.
Right.
Diving involves multiple tasks: navigating, managing buoyancy, monitoring equipment, communicating with our buddy. The manual really stresses how important it is to prioritize those tasks.
So break things down into smaller steps. Focus on one thing at a time. But how do we make sure we're not getting tunnel vision? Getting so focused on one thing that we miss other important cues in our environment.
That's where perceptual narrowing comes in.
Okay.
When we're stressed or super focused on one task, we tend to miss those subtle cues around us.
It's like having blinders on.
Exactly. So even when we're laser focused on a specific task, we need to maintain that broader awareness.
Right. Keep scanning, keep checking in. Now, speaking of stress, I noticed the manual has a whole section on understanding and managing stress underwater.
That's huge. I think everyone experiences some level of stress underwater, whether they realize it or not.
Oh, definitely.
And the manual does a great job of explaining how stress can trigger that chain reaction that leads to anxiety and panic.
It's like a snowball effect. One little worry can turn into something much bigger if you let it.
Exactly. So how do we stop that snowball before it becomes an avalanche? The key is recognizing those early signs of stress.
What are some of those signs?
Increased breathing rate, tunnel vision, trouble focusing. These are all red flags. And the manual gives some great tips for staying calm. Taking slow, deep breaths, focusing on your breathing, reminding yourself that you've got the skills to handle the situation.
It's about having those mental tools, those coping mechanisms, ready to go when you need them.
Absolutely. And having a plan for dealing with common problems, like what to do if your equipment malfunctions or if you get separated from your buddy.
Having a plan gives you a sense of control, which can really reduce anxiety.
Exactly. It's like having a mental roadmap for those challenging situations. And finally, the manual emphasizes the importance of being honest with yourself about your capabilities.
About what you're comfortable with.
Exactly. Anyone can call any dive at any time for any reason. There's no shame in that.
It's about recognizing when a dive is beyond your comfort zone or your skill level and having the courage to speak up.
And speaking of calling dives, the manual wraps up this section on skills with what they call the water concept.
Water concept.
It's a framework for becoming a better diver. It stands for wisdom, attitude, training, experience, and repetition.
Okay, I like acronyms.
It's like a recipe for success in the underwater world.
Okay, break it down for me. What's wisdom all about?
Wisdom is about knowing your limits, being honest with yourself about your capabilities, and choosing dives that match your skill level and experience, making those smart decisions based on your knowledge and self-awareness.
So wisdom is knowing when to say no to a dive that's maybe a little bit beyond your limits.
Exactly, putting safety first.
Okay. What about attitude?
Attitude is about approaching diving with a mature and responsible mindset. It's about respecting the underwater environment, following safety protocols, and always prioritizing safety over, ego or peer pressure.
So being a good ambassador for the underwater world, setting a good example for others.
Exactly. Now, training, that's about seeking out professional instruction.
Okay, so never stop learning.
Right.
Always looking to improve.
It's about expanding your knowledge and skills, not just resting on what you already know.
Okay. So we've got wisdom, attitude, training, what's next?
Experience.
Okay, so that's about getting out there and doing it, right?
Exactly. Building your diving knowledge and comfort level through those gradual and progressive dives. Learning from each dive and applying those lessons to your future dives.
So turning all those underwater adventures into valuable lessons.
Exactly. And last but not least, repetition.
Ah, repetition. So it's not just about learning the skills once, it's about practicing them over and over and over again.
Exactly. It's about developing that muscle memory so that you can respond instinctively in challenging situations.
So those skills become second nature.
Exactly.
The water concept, that's a great reminder that becoming a proficient and safe diver, it's a journey, not a destination.
It's about constantly learning, growing, and refining your skills, and embracing the challenge.
Welcome back to the deep dive.
We're wrapping up our exploration of the IANTD Essentials Diver Manual.
And in this final part, we're going to bring everything together, all the pieces of the puzzle.
We've covered so much, from what happens inside our bodies when we dive, to how to choose the right gear and plan those dives carefully, and of course, mastering those essential diving skills.
It's been a real journey, but now it's time to see how it all fits together. How do all those elements, the physiology, the equipment, the planning, the skills, create a truly safe and successful diving experience?
One of the key takeaways from this manual is this idea that diving is holistic. It's not just a bunch of separate skills.
Holistic. Okay, help me wrap my head around that. What does that actually mean for us as divers?
It means recognizing that everything's connected. Our physiology, our environment, the choices we make with our gear, it all plays a role in the overall experience. The manual talks about developing a systems thinking approach to diving.
Okay, systems thinking. What's that all about?
It's about understanding that every action has a reaction.
Okay.
And in diving, those reactions can kind of ripple through the whole system. For example, think about your physical fitness.
Yeah.
That can affect your air consumption.
Right.
And then your air consumption influences your decompression obligations. And then those obligations, in turn, they impact how you plan your dive.
It's like a domino effect.
Exactly.
One thing leads to another. It's all connected.
It all comes back to that interconnectedness.
So it's not enough to just know how to do a frog kick or like how to calculate our rock bottom gas. We have to understand how all those pieces fit together.
Yeah.
How our actions can have these like ripple effects throughout the whole dive.
Exactly. It's about seeing the bigger picture.
And that leads us to another crucial aspect that the manual really emphasizes: personal responsibility.
Yes.
It's about taking ownership of our own safety underwater.
Yeah.
Not just relying on our buddies or our dive guides or even our equipment to keep us safe.
Right. It's about being proactive, doing our own research, asking those questions, really understanding the risks and what we can do to minimize them.
So it's like we're not just passive passengers on this underwater journey. We're active participants.
Exactly. And diving does have inherent risks, but we can manage those risks effectively if we approach it with knowledge and skill and, a healthy dose of caution.
So it's not about eliminating risk altogether. It's about being smart about it, being prepared, knowing how to handle those challenges when they arise.
That's the key.
And that brings us full circle back to the water concept, which I think really captures this essence of personal responsibility and continuous improvement as a diver.
It does. Wisdom, attitude, training, experience, and repetition. They're like the pillars of a solid foundation for safe diving.
And they all tie into that idea of systems thinking and personal responsibility, Wisdom is about knowing what we can handle and diving within our limits.
Right. Not letting ego or peer pressure push us beyond our comfort zone.
And attitude. Well, that's about approaching diving with a mature and responsible mindset, respecting the underwater world and always putting safety first.
Absolutely. And training. Training is about seeking out those opportunities to learn, to grow our skill set, to deepen our understanding of diving principles.
And experience, that's where the magic happens.
Uh,
That's where we get to put all that knowledge into practice, learn from our dives, and build our confidence over time.
and with repetition, all those skills we've learned, well, they become almost second nature. We build that muscle memory, that instinctive response. And that can make a world of difference when we face a challenge.
The water concept. It's such a great framework for approaching diving in a safe and responsible way.
It reminds us that becoming a truly skilled diver, well, it's an ongoing journey.
It's about continually learning and growing and pushing our limits while always respecting our own boundaries.
And embracing the challenge of exploring this amazing underwater world.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the INTD Essentials Diver Manual, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought.
This manual isn't just a book, it's a guide. It's a roadmap to becoming a safer, more confident, and more responsible diver.
It's packed with knowledge and insights that can take your diving to a whole new level. But it's not enough to just read about it, right?
Yeah.
We have to take that knowledge and put it into practice.
Get out there, explore, learn, and keep growing with every dive.
So keep diving, keep learning, and keep exploring that amazing world beneath the waves.
And until next time, happy bubbles.
Happy bubbles.